I'm Melissa Shanahan, and this is the Velocity Work Podcast, episode number 140. This podcast is for attorneys who are running their own firms. We explore tactics, tools, and stories related to pushing past simply lawyering well and into building a successful firm. Working in your firm and working on your business are two very different things. This podcast focuses on the latter. Hi guys, welcome to this week's episode. Okay, so here's what's happening. February 18th, I am going to be teaching a class which I haven't done since August. Come on, all you law firm owners who listen into this podcast, come and hang with me for about an hour and a half. On February 18th, it's going to be at noon Eastern, 10 a.m. Mountain. And you can sign up for the class by going to velocitywork.com/results. Okay. You can also just get there through the website. You'll see a button to get to it. Now, listen, what I'm going to be presenting there is really the next level of my teachings because it's taking all the important things that I have been sharing on this podcast for 2.5 years now. Every single week I've had an episode. And all the work I've been doing with clients and that I have done with clients. And I am seeing a new way to present it so that it's even easier, which in my book means more useful, for you all to digest and use for yourself and for your firms to get traction towards your goals. So go sign up because it's going to be great. I have diagrams, I have visuals. It's a new way of teaching it, and I'm excited to be able to do it with you guys. So come and hang with me for an hour and a half at the most on February 18th at noon Eastern. Now, today, what I'm going to do is I'm going to cover this topic high level because there's a lot of really good things to think about. And when you come to class, we're going to give this concept legs for you, okay? But I wanted to share just high level, some of these concepts, your brain can start thinking and you can start identifying things for yourself that are going to be really useful and pay off. The stuff that matters, you're going to wake up to. The concept that we're going to be digging into and that I'm going to be talking about here today is called the results cycle. This understanding is going to be key. There's two types of people that stand out in my mind for this. And if you're one of these two types of people, you're my kind of person. One is if you love learning about habits. So for instance, if you love James Clear's book, Atomic Habits, then this is something that you're going to need to understand because there are some misconceptions about habits, which I think he does a fantastic job speaking to. But most people don't think about habits correctly, and it's a problem for themselves. They don't see that. But if you understand what we're going to talk about today and in the class, you will start to see that. The second type of person that this is perfect for is anyone who's shooting for a specific goal. And if you aren't shooting for a specific goal, please let me help you. That is not the way to go. I promise you, it's not the way to go. So plug in, let me help you. If you're shooting for something very specific, and by the way, specific, let's just say you don't have a number goal that you're shooting for. You aren't there yet. You haven't done that for yourself yet. You kind of know you should, but you haven't done it yet. Okay. But the goal also I would allow to be considered in this is something very specific, like a finish line that you're going to cross. So maybe a project that is done, like tied a bow on, totally done and serving your practice. It's like a project, I guess, is the way I would think about this. So that also would apply. So something very specific that you want to get done, or thinking of a number goal, something very specific that you are aiming for. It is a target and you are going to get there. Those are the two kinds of people. You're aiming for something specific, or you are just into the habit conversation and you love James Clear. That's the best way I can think of. He's like the guy I think of when it comes to habits. Now, a little bit on habits. And this is why I'm saying if you're into habits, you really need to understand what we're talking about with the results cycle. The definition of a habit is an impulse to do a behavior with little or no conscious thought. Now, I want you to stop and think about for a moment. A lot of the things that are going to be worth doing that are your tickets to the dreams that you have for yourself are never going to be habits because there's always going to be things that you can't make a habit because the definition of a habit is an impulse to do a behavior with little or no conscious thought. Let me tell you something. That quote that I've said here on the podcast many times, that the smartest people on the planet are always reaching for the next rung on the ladder, but they know it's not about the next rung. It's about the stretch. That stretch portion that we're talking about will always require conscious effort. It will always require you to be awake at the wheel and not sort of this unconscious impulse to do something. Like, that's a habit. Listen, there are all kinds of habits that will serve us in our life. So I'm not dissing habits, but I think too often we think if we just cultivate the right habits, then we will be successful. It's not true. It can be a part of your equation, totally. But people put too much emphasis on habits. And when I explain the result cycle, I think you'll see why it tends to be that we do that. Okay, I think the best way to introduce this concept to you is to just imagine for a moment that you are working towards something very specific. You are lining yourself up to a goal. Now, for the sake of simplicity, let's say it's a revenue goal for your firm. Okay, now set that aside for a second. The second thing I want you to think about that's always true is that no matter what actions you are taking in the world, you are creating a result for yourself. Results, plural, for yourself. Always, 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 always. Now, you are always either in a high result cycle or a low result cycle. That is it. There is no in between. And if you are shooting for something very specific, then it is in your best interest to be in a high result cycle instead of a low result cycle. You will always be in one or the other. And listen, if you are human, even if you are so good at what we're going to be talking about today, you will find yourself at times in a low result cycle. I'm going to define high result cycle and low result cycle, and then we'll talk more about this. Now, it's not rocket science, right? But I am going to define it for you here. So a high result cycle is a series of results useful to the ultimate desired outcome, like whatever it is you're shooting for, right? It's a series of results that is useful to get there. A low result cycle is a series of results that undermines the ultimate desired outcome. To be in a high result cycle, you have to be aiming for something specific because you've got to line yourself up with that thing. And once you make the decision on what that thing is, surface level or just at face value, what seems like makes up the entire high result cycle is that you go to work to implement whatever you need to implement in order to get yourself on track for that goal or completion of the project. And then technically, which is true, this is good, you would evaluate what's working, what's not working, apply the lessons. This is like your learning points, right? You learn on purpose and then you move forward with the next iteration or the next way of moving forward. And then you lift your head and you learn some more, and then you put your head back down and you go to work, that cycle until you hit your goal, period. This is the difference between being very committed to a goal, which is I will do what it takes and when I will hit it when I hit it. I want to hit it in this 12 months, but doesn't matter when I hit it, I will hit this thing. It's like this hard commitment to learning after you implement and then go again, and then learning after you implement and then go again, just to be able to refine and apply the lessons that you learned so that you get smarter and smarter as you go, right? And you can speed up your traction towards the goal. Now, the difference between being committed to the goal versus attached to the goal is people who are just attached to the goal will start implementing and it won't be going the way that they wanted. And so then they'll switch their focus and they'll move to something different. Or they will say that they chose the wrong project or they chose the wrong goal or whatever it is, they change something external to them instead of being committed to what they said they were going to do. And it spits them into what we'll talk about in a second. It spits them into a low result cycle. When you stay committed and you're not just attached to the hit of the win, of the hit of the goal, you are committed to it no matter what. You keep showing up for the goal no matter what. This will put you and keep you in a high result cycle. Now, you're either in one or the other on the way to the goal, right? And you'll have periods, and you want longer and longer periods of being in a high result cycle, but you will still have moments or days where you are in a low result cycle. On the flip side, what that looks like in a low result cycle is you either allowing your focus to be swept away from the commitment that you made, which is making a decision to switch your focus. And it may be an unconscious decision, like you didn't even realize, you just kind of got swept up in the busyness of things and stopped focusing on the things you said you needed to do in order to hit your goal. But it's still a decision. And this is what is so important about being in a high results cycle. Requires you to be awake. Awake, awake, awake. You have to be awake at the wheel towards where you want to go and what you want to create for yourself. And listen, I have been hearing so many good things from you guys about the podcast episode that I did called Don't Flake Out on Yourself. That is probably my top feedback episode ever that I've ever done, which is shocking to me. I love that it landed and resonated so well with you guys, but this is why this is important. If you actually want to honor everything I said in the Don't Flake Out on Yourself episode, which was just a few weeks ago from this one, you could go check that out, then this matters. You have to be on purpose in a high result cycle as much as you possibly can so that you can actually create the results you want to create so that you don't flake out on yourself. If you're in a high result cycle, you don't flake out on yourself. Another thing with high result cycles is that they are high integrity. That's a characteristic of that cycle, or a byproduct of that cycle is high integrity, as well as high progress is also a sort of a signal, a byproduct of being in a high result cycle. So going back to the point a minute ago, high result cycles are required that you stay awake. And when we allow ourselves to get swept up in the busyness or overwhelm of things, we slip into unconsciousness in terms of our result cycle towards where we want to go. Okay. And this is important because this is so common. I would imagine that this is probably the most common reason that my clients find themselves not moving at the clip that they want to move towards what they've imagined for themselves. It is because of this. And it feels almost like you are at the whim of the world, like you don't really have a choice, but that is never true. Which kind of leads me to this next point that I want to make. And this is what we'll be digging into more and more and more, and really working this diagram and this concept from different angles for you to guys be able to really understand it. But there are 3 causal factors, or 3 control factors that you can use to determine which result cycle you will be in. And these 3 factors are literally the only points of control that you have that will either kick you into a high result cycle or spit you into a low result cycle. Either way, they will deliver you. And it is your only points of control. Most people focus on action, 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 action. And that isn't terrible. I mean, hey, we have to take a ton of action to get where we want to go, right? Like that's a given. But when people don't understand what drives their action, then they are missing out. It's like they're using one of the 3 controls that they have. And it's always kind of handicapped. And so people take a bunch of action and they wonder why it's not sustainable. They wonder why they can't keep up with it. They wonder why they have these dips, like high highs and low lows in terms of action and taking action. And the problem with that is it's just a lack of awareness that you actually have 3 control points, not just one, and you're only using one. So the 3 control points, which I've talked about here before, and we'll talk about in a really pragmatic, practical way in the class, but it's your perspective or your attitude. You always have control over that. And we know that, but we don't actually consciously, deliberately cultivate and curate that. And then the second is your feeling state. And that sounds fluffy. I mean, come on, 50% of you probably just went like, oh, Melissa, okay. Then you know what? You can just stop listening and walk away. For those of you who are open and willing to hear this, you will change your own game. The deal is your perspective, the way that you think about something, the way that you view it, it determines your feeling state. That's why you could put 2 people looking at the exact same circumstance and one feels something positive and one feels something negative. It's because of their perspective about what is in front of them, what is happening. And a lot of times we think that what we think about something, it's just an opinion. Like it's a thought and it's optional, but we don't realize that. We think that it's a fact and it's not. There are things that happen outside of us, and is what we choose to think about the things that happen outside of us. And that perspective, that is your point of power, because from there, you generate a feeling state, whether it's on purpose or not. I highly recommend you do this on purpose. You generate a feeling state. And from that feeling state, you will take a very specific kind of action that's very natural to take from that feeling state. And what people don't understand is that they just try to take action from a really crappy feeling state. Then they have to use a bunch of willpower in order to take the kind of action that will spit you into a high result cycle. And you know what doesn't last long? Willpower. Willpower is a resource that's used from a place of resistance, straight up. And what's even crazier is that using willpower, which is coming from this place of resistance, it's like you're taking the wrong action. It feels right in the moment because it feels like, well, it's something, and this is the path I can see forward, so we're going to do this. But coming from that place, the action that you're taking is not as high quality as what it could be. And so if you can understand and have an awareness about the other two control factors, then everything goes more smoothly and you catapult yourself into a high result cycle without a ton of pushing. It's just natural. It flows because your perspective about what's in front of you and about the gap between where you are now and where you want to go, or about whatever you're dealing with in front of you, you're choosing it on purpose, which means you're going to be generating a feeling state that's much higher quality or more productive. Let's just say that it's more productive, where from a higher quality feeling state, you're going to take higher quality action. The simplest way that I can explain this to you is that if you think crappy thoughts, you will feel crappier than you should, and you will take crappier action than you need to. But if you think high quality thoughts, then your feeling state will be productive. And from that productive feeling state, you will take the kind of action that will spit you into a high result cycle that will propel you towards the results that you want to see. Also, we don't get to live here 24/7 because we're human. We have human brains, we have emotions, we have things that we have to navigate. So it's not about always being in this, but it's about taking control where you can take control. And people don't do that in the way that they could. And truly, it's because they don't know how. And it's because of a lack of awareness. It's typically not because they're stubborn, although I've got some stubbornness in me. I'm sure many of you do too. But that's not typically the reason that they don't take control where they could. It's available to them, but they don't do it. And whatever your reasons are for not doing it in the past, by learning this and understanding this and being able to see the diagram and being able to find yourself in it and being able to find your patterns in it, you will wake up to a different way of operating that will keep you more often in a high result cycle, which will be less frustrating and more ease and flow towards the very thing that you're working on and working towards than being in a low result cycle. What typically looks like the actions in a low result cycle is there's a lot of questioning. There's a lot of taking your time deciding on things, recreating or starting over what you started something and you switch your focus. You're going to start new on something different. And then you go back to the other project and then you kind of have to start over to find your bearings again. There's a lot of that bouncing around and then mentally spinning, telling yourself that this is hard or you're confused or you're not sure how to do it. You don't have the bandwidth to figure out how to do it. This is it. And then ultimately what ends up happening again, and I know many of you will understand this, and I know what this feels like, is that when you are in a low result cycle where you are questioning, you're spending your time spinning on things, you're in confusion, you stop doing one thing and start doing the next thing for whatever reason it feels like the right move, and then you bounce back to this thing. Oh, and there's a new shiny object over here. Whatever that version for you looks like, because we all have those times. What you end up having to do is resell the people around you on the thing that you're focusing on now. That is exhausting. And it's almost like the boy who cried wolf. Eventually people are like, yeah. Like people lose faith in you because the low integrity cycle, the low result cycle is because we aren't just sticking with one thing and seeing it through to completion. And it's so hard to do that if you do not understand where your control factors are. If you don't understand the determinants of what result cycle you will end in, then of course you're going to stay in your typical patterns. that is why I'm teaching this class. A big reason that this got sparked was because of the feedback that I got on that Don't Flake Out on Yourself podcast. And I was like, wow, what about that really got to people? Because I've been talking about some of these concepts for so long that for whatever reason, the way it was phrased that day was really helpful. And so I want you to allow for this episode to build on that one. And I want you to understand that you are the determinant factor on which cycle you are going to be in the majority of the time. Are you going to be in a high results cycle the majority of the time? Or are you going to be in a low results cycle and keep this pattern spinning? And here's the last thing I'll say on today's episode is do not make it mean something about you if you can identify a pattern that you're in a low result cycle more than you want to be. And it is because of what your brain is telling you. It's because of how busy you are. It's hard to catch your breath. You can't find the time to do this stuff. Truly, this is normal. Your brain is just doing what your brain is supposed to do. It's not being directed. And so by having this model, this diagram, this concept, if you can really wrap your hands around this and look at your points of power, then it will easily, much more easily put you on a path on where you need to go. It's just like you'll get to finally see it for what it is instead of making it mean something about you and your worth or if you're lazy. Like I hear clients say that sometimes. I'm like, what are you talking about? You are not lazy. You are just allowing a certain part of your brain to win at this game. All we have to do is train your brain in order to get yourself on a different track. And that is how you operate. That's your operating system. And so it really is just about your operating system, finding these control factors, these control points, and really leveraging those. And that's it. The rest takes care of itself. So instead of just taking a bunch of action and chasing the right action, you got to do the right things and just go, go, go. That's an exhausting way to go about things. And most of the time, it will deceptively put you into a low result cycle because you just aren't coming from the right place with it. You aren't using all three control factors. You're only using one, which is the action. They are all tied together, these three. And we'll talk about that in the class. But it's important for me that you just as listeners understand that now, today. It's so easy to make this so complex. And even with the diagram that I have that I'll be sharing in the presentation, even with that, you'll look at the diagram and without facilitation and without teaching on that, you will look at the diagram and find yourself somewhere in the diagram and identify what you're doing wrong, and you will be wrong. You need to go back to the control points. And those three control points happen before you are ever spit into a cycle. That is where you have to focus. And if you can go back to that, this is like the essentials. It's the fundamentals. If you go back to that, the rest will take care of itself. You know, I had another thought as well. I've been thinking a lot about my clients' success. You guys just heard me with Michael Urbina on the podcast and with Springs Law Group, Chris and Jake on the podcast. And I mean, they're just examples of the other clients I work with that are doing amazing things and experiencing extraordinary growth and surprising themselves, like blowing their own minds with what is possible. And here's what I know for sure. By signing up with Velocity Work, these people have deliberately plugged themselves into a cycle that is high results cycle. Now, they still have to do the work. But a lot of the cognitive load is cut out by joining Velocity Work. And that is something I'm really proud of. I didn't have the language for that even 6 months ago, but that's what I can see is happening. Because in Velocity Work, we have a framework that we abide by, period. And what that looks like is you make decisions about what exactly you're heading for. And then with us, you make a really strong plan to get there. We facilitate that. And then your job is to honor your plan. But while you're honoring it, there's support put into place. So there's coaching calls, there's the community, there's accountability built in that will help you keep your control factors, the things that you have control over, will help keep your focus on those, your awareness on those. You will be awake to those so that you stay in a high results cycle. So what Velocity Work has done, and then by the way, at the next quarter, after you make your quarterly plan, the next quarter you show up, that's where we evaluate. We learn the lessons and you apply the lessons moving forward. So it is this virtuous cycle upwards. And I am pumped that that's the case. Now, I am not taking credit for doing the work. The clients do the work, right? The clients are the ones that show up and they put in the time and they show up to our quarterly retreats, but I facilitate that. And that is what Velocity Work is good at. I do not have your answers, but I know that I could facilitate and get them out of you and then coach you and then hold you accountable and provide community. That's what a partner looks like. All right, everybody. Have a beautiful week. I will see you here next Tuesday and hopefully in February 18th class. Hey, you may not know this, but there's a free guide for a process that I teach called Monday Map, Friday Wrap. If you go to velocitywork.com, it's all yours. It's about how to plan your time and honor your plan so that week over week, more work that moves the needle is getting done in less time. Go to velocitywork.com to get your free copy.